Hi, I'm Jim Paxson. Today we'll show you some of Arizona's most iconic wildlife, from a herd of pronghorn down south to majestic bald eagles along our waterways, and we'll also meet some critters that are a pretty big deal in Arizona. All that and more right now on Arizona Wildlife Views.
Arizona Wildlife Views is brought to you by the sale of hunting and fishing licenses and the Heritage Fund, lottery dollars working for wildlife. Some projects made possible by the Sport Fish and Wildlife Restoration Fund.
Welcome to our show. Today in our first story, we'll take you to the magnificent grasslands of southeastern Arizona, where a small herd of pronghorn antelope has triumphed over difficult circumstances in order to survive.
On a brisk January morning in 2014, 40 pronghorn antelope captured in New Mexico were released in southeastern Arizona. 23 of them were returned to the wild near the small communities of Sonoyta and Elgin. As they ran into the distance, they had no idea they were running to the rescue. They were brought here to help save a local herd of pronghorn that was at risk of dying out. The Sonoyta-Elgin herd had been crashing hard, and by 2011 only a handful of animals remained. It's unclear exactly what caused the population decline, but growth and development, roads and fences are at least partially to blame. People are responsible for altering the pronghorn's historic habitat, but as you're about to see, they're also the reason why the Sonoyta-Elgin herd is finally making a comeback. These rolling grasslands surrounding the communities of Sonoyta and Elgin are ideal habitat for pronghorn. Wide open spaces give these sharp-eyed animals clear views to spot approaching predators and plenty of room to escape them. The pronghorn antelope is the fastest land animal in North America. In short bursts, it can exceed 60 miles an hour. Coyotes and other predators have a hard time catching these speedy critters, but they have no problem feeding on their young.
It's pretty crazy how many coyotes we have down here.
During their first few weeks of life, pronghorn fawns are too weak to run with the herd, so they stay hidden in tall grasses. But coyotes are pretty good at finding them.
They're coming in here and they're hunting specifically for fawns during that time of the year.
In fact, coyotes are known to kill 75% or more of all the fawns born each year. A large, robust herd of pronghorn can withstand that level of predation, but a small, aging herd is much less likely to survive.
If you're at 16 animals and the loss of 4 fawns is gone, that's catastrophic. If you're at 100 animals and you have 60 reproducing does, the loss of 40 fawns can be tolerated because you have the other 20.
The numbers were not in favor of the Sonoyta-Elgin herd. By 2011, its population had plummeted to fewer than 20 animals. To make matters worse, the herd was not replenishing itself. There was zero fawn recruitment from 2009 to 2011.
And so it was time to do something or risk the total loss of that population.
It desperately needed some help, and in 2012, it got it. The Arizona Game and Fish Department partnered with the Arizona Antelope Foundation on a multi-year project to restore the dwindling herd. It would cost about $150,000. Some of that money would come from the sale of special big game tags issued by the Arizona Game and Fish Commission. Funding partners provided the rest. They include the AAF, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, Pima County, Safari Club International, Arizona Deer Association, Mule Deer Foundation, and Cochise County Community Foundation. Additional ground support came from local landowners, ranchers, the BLM, ADOT, and hundreds of volunteers. The project started by stepping up habitat improvement projects that were already underway. That included removing mesquite and other invaders that were taking over the grasslands, building water catchments to offset the ongoing drought, and modifying fences to give pronghorn easier access to more of their historic range. Pronghorn don't like to go over fences, but they will go under them, so a lot of work was done to replace the bottom strand of barbed wire with a smooth strand raised about 18 inches off the ground. With habitat improvements moving along, it was time to do something about the abundant population of coyotes in the area. The project called for temporary and targeted predator control using hunting and trapping methods. It would only take place from April to about mid-June when pronghorn are dropping fawns.
You know, we're trying to give the pronghorn and the fawns just a little window during that critical time of their life where they can get up to an age class that they're able to move with the herd. We're just trying to buy them some time while they're in that stage of development that they're just basically helpless.
The results were immediate.
I got a single doe. All I can see is one right now. Yep, there's a fawn with her, 2 of them.
In the initial year of predator control, 20 fawns were counted. 17 more were discovered the following year. The Sonoyta-Elgin herd was finally getting a foothold, but it would take something extra to give them a fighting chance at survival.
It is a very big day.
The 2014 translocation of pronghorn from New Mexico was that much-needed shot in the arm. 23 animals were added to the Sonoyta-Elgin herd, giving it some much-needed genetic diversity. A few weeks later, the Arizona Game and Fish Department and an army of volunteers set out to capture as many as 70 pronghorn near Prescott Valley.
We were able to build the wing fences and get a corral and alleyway completed. Then we were able to put a helicopter in the air. That helicopter herded those pronghorn along, negotiated a series of fences, and managed to get them into the corral. At that point, we go ahead and let them rest there, put up some blinds, so tarps around the corral structure. That allows them to calm down, and we let them stand for about an hour. Then we went in, processed them, gave them a health assessment, gave them a few antibiotics and injections to kind of help them along.
All of the animals get a numbered ear tag, and some are fitted with GPS collars.
We then loaded them into the boxes and held them until we were ready to transport them.
Students from the Future Farmers of America program at Tombstone High School were among the volunteers who helped process the animals.
I helped ear tag them, and I helped carry them out to the trailer.
I've been with the project for since it started about 2 or 3 years ago, and actually getting to finally be out here with the capturing, actually getting to see them hands-on. I mean, the closest we've ever seen them was just with binoculars, so actually being in there with them and getting to see them and touch them and put the tags on their ears, it was really cool.
After the animals are released, the students will be tracking those pronghorn wearing GPS collars to see how they use their home range and where man-made barriers are restricting their movement. The helicopter crew spent one more day chasing pronghorn, but it never had any more luck pushing them into the trap. So the captured animals hit the road, and the next morning they arrived in the Sonoyta Plains.
This capture wasn't as successful as we would have liked. We would have liked to have had quite a number more animals.
Only 5 pronghorn were set to be released after one died during transport and another died at the capture.
Everything we do when we're managing wildlife and doing a translocation, there are risks to the individual animals. So we always try to ensure that when we're doing a release, that we're actually going to do, population-wise, we're giving a real benefit to the population where we're releasing the animals, and try to minimize the risk to the extent possible for the individual animals that we're transporting.
Losing even one animal is absolutely heartbreaking for the biologists and volunteers who work so hard to protect and conserve wildlife.
This is why it's so important to keep habitats intact, keep conditions favorable for populations, because it is difficult to restore populations once they get at very low numbers.
Wildlife conservation is extremely difficult, but it's also incredibly rewarding.
This population was absolutely in dire need. We're just adding a few more that we were able to catch this week to try and supplement this population, give them a few more numbers so that they can really start doing well.
What started as a 3-year project was extended one more year. Then, in the summer of 2015, it was over. The only thing left to do was to get a final count. That last ground survey took place the morning of June 15th.
Yeah, this is our 4th intensive fawn survey, and I'm gonna get emotional. And 4 years ago, we counted just 33 antelope, and today we counted 144 antelope. And of those 144, 55 are young of the year. There's likely more out there. We had an 85% fawn success. It's just very rewarding.
It's the result of a lot of hard work and a little help from Mother Nature.
This past winter, late winter and early spring, we had an unusually high amount of moisture, probably to the tune of 6.5 to 7 inches right here in this area. So we've got great green up. The does' weights are up. The fawn weights are up, and as a result, a lot of these fawns will survive given their conditions and their size. So everything's looking good. We'll come in here in August and do our aerial survey and confirm everything.
On August 15th, the survey crew took to the sky.
I was the primary observer for our annual pronghorn antelope surveys. So we fly transects and we count the number of animals that we see. We classify them according to bucks, does, fawns, and that helps us determine what our populations are doing, if they're remaining stable, if they're growing. We saw a lot of pronghorn. We saw about 130 pronghorn. And we are just absolutely elated with the numbers we've been getting. The pronghorn are doing incredibly well. There's a really good fawn crop this year. We were seeing tons of fawns from the year. They're doing remarkably well. The population is growing.
The numbers weren't quite as high as before, but they were close. Out of 129 pronghorn, 46 were fawns. That's a ratio of 77 fawns for every 100 does. Remember, for 3 straight years before this project started, that ratio was 0. Absolutely no fawns were surviving, but now they were thriving.
Which is just incredibly exciting to us. You know, we're back in pronghorn business down here.
Thanks to solid science, hard work, and a steadfast determination to maintain the natural diversity of wildlife that exists on the Sonoyta Range.
Making sure that the pronghorn in this grassland, which they were native to, was self-sustaining.
Like right where that notch is in there.
Okay, rope is down. Stepping off the edge of a cliff, dangling high above a lake, dropping into a bald eagle's nest. For an eagle biologist, it's just another day at the office. For these homeschooled kids, it's a day they'll never forget.
They're going to be taking measurements, weights, all that stuff. They'll be explaining things to you.
The Arizona Game and Fish Department invited them and members of the media to Lake Pleasant for an up-close look at bald eagle banding. They followed these biologists to a nest perched on a cliff overlooking the lake. In it are 2 6-week-old eaglets. That's good news for this area where the nests have failed the past 5 years.
Here at Lake Pleasant, we've got 2 bald eagle breeding areas. The one we're going to today is the newer of the 2. And this pair started a few years ago. This is the first time that they've raised young to an age that we can ban them. So it's a pretty exciting day.
It was an exciting year. 2015 was the most productive year for Arizona's bald eagles since they were listed as an endangered species in 1978. 59 breeding pairs produced 66 eaglets that went on to leave the nest. That's more than 1 fledgling per pair, sort of the national gold standard for bald eagle productivity. It's also nearly 20 more than average over the last 10 years. Bald eagles were taken off the endangered species list in 2007, but they're still protected by state and federal laws, and they continue to be carefully managed by Arizona Game and Fish. In fact, much of their success is likely due to the department's ongoing conservation efforts under the guidance of the Southwest Bald Eagle Management Committee. Biologists usually do this work without an audience. In fact, keeping people away from nest sites is a top priority because too much human activity can cause breeding pairs to abandon their nest.
Lake Pleasant's such a destination place for boaters and fishermen and jet skiers. You end up having so much activity going on in this area that it'll drive the adults off the nest. They won't be attending the eggs as they should.
So each year during breeding season, Arizona Game and Fish closes areas around bald eagle nests that are especially vulnerable to human disturbance. In addition, nest watchers like Frank Mayer keep a constant eye on sensitive breeding areas like this one.
I sit over there on that road and watch the eagle nest all day long to see what they're eating and what the birds' behaviors are, and also to keep people out of the closed areas.
After rappelling down to the nest, Kurt License places hoods over the eaglets' heads to calm them down.
Yeah, that hood keeps them real docile.
Let's do that other side.
He covers their sharp talons with fleece booties. Then he puts them in a padded bag to protect them as they're hoisted up the side of the cliff.
All right, birds are yours. Onto the belay line.
Biologists Kyle McCarty and Tuck Jacobson take it from there. They each grab a bird and begin processing it.
Okay. So I'll be able to tell from this leg measurement if it's a male or female. The females are actually larger, 13.5. This one is a male.
He's actually not too stinky. Oh, yeah? I'd have expected much stinkier.
Every bird that gets banded has a band for the Fish and Wildlife Service, which is the silver one. Our other band is a nice color band, which you can see the identification a little better. So from a distance, we can read that and identify this bird. That'll tell us it was banded this year at this nest. And if we knew who the parents were, we could get that whole lineage.
This eaglet will be known as 30 over Y. His brother is 30 over X.
All right. Looks good.
In the meantime, Kurt is taking an inventory of the nest and removing any potential hazards.
There was some fishing line, pulled that out, and there's also some ticks in there. So we collected some samples of those. We'll get that to our veterinary specialist and she'll be able to take a look. Prey remains, we found some birds, a lot of fish, striped bass seemed to be their preference there, and even some crayfish. So quite a few variety of things in there.
Meanwhile, the eaglet's parents are flying overhead, screaming their disapproval. But they will return to the nest when their babies are back and everyone has left the area.
The eagles are so invested at this point in the breeding attempt that they'll come back within a couple hours. He's not going to like this one.
Of course, disturbing an eagle's nest is never ideal. But by banding these birds, researchers can collect valuable data over the eagle's lifetime.
All right, we'll do the weight and then he'll be done. Ready? Yep. clear.
Yep.
3 kilograms, which is about 6.5 pounds.
In the nest, we had 2 male, about 5.5-week-old nestlings. They looked very healthy. They had a lot of weight on them.
They're not flighted yet, so they don't jump out of the nest when we get down there. And we did a bunch of other measurements, and he looks right on target for everything.
I was really surprised how big the eagles were. They said the adults were 6 feet wingspan, and then the babies were a lot bigger than I thought they would be.
And the nest was big too. Like, you could stand in it.
You want to get a picture?
I'd love a picture.
Okay.
66 Arizona bald eagles fledged in 2015, and biologists banded 29 of them. That's 29 opportunities to learn much more about these magnificent birds. After posing for pictures, the eaglets get a quick spray bath to cool them down before they go back into the bag for the ride down to their nest.
It's cool.
I really enjoyed doing this. It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
Participating in this important work seems to have made an impression on the kids.
It was amazing. I love it so much.
That alone is positive news for Arizona's bald eagles.
Hopefully these kids will grow up with this memory of this experience and carry that forward in their lives as an opportunity to do good for wildlife in the future.
Arizona became the state it is today thanks to those 5 C's we learned about in grade school: copper, cotton, cattle, citrus, and climate. Well, there's another C that continues to make this state great, and that's critters. With over 800 species, Arizona is in the top 5 states for wildlife diversity, and Arizona Game and Fish manages all of those critters for the people of Arizona. Each one is special, but some are a pretty big deal. They've been selected as official state symbols, earning them a spot in our statutes and in the Arizona Capitol Museum. To get to know some of these critters, we spoke with the Game and Fish Department's Watchable Wildlife Program Manager, Randy Babb.
Yeah, cactus wren is our state bird.
We started with the cactus wren, which became the Arizona state bird back in 1931.
Very, very distinctive and iconic. It's the largest wren in the United States. Nests are often, but not always, constructed in cactus like cholla. So the spinier, the better.
The next 4 critters achieved symbol status in 1986. They were selected by grade school kids as part of the Game and Fish Department's Arizona Wildlife Awareness Program. The Arizona ridge-nosed rattlesnake beat out the Gila monster as the kids' choice for state reptile.
Ridge-nosed rattlesnake is one of our smallest rattlesnake species in the state. They're found in southeastern Arizona and a handful of mountain ranges just north of the Mexican border. As young, they actually feed quite a bit on centipedes.
The students selected the Arizona tree frog as the state amphibian.
They become active with the onset of the summer rains. They have this real nice little quacky call that you will hear on any rainy night in July on into August.
The ringtail edged out the white-tailed deer to become state mammal.
Ringtails are related to coatis, raccoons. They're strongly nocturnal. They once were very commonly associated with miners who kept them as pets. As a matter of fact, one of their nicknames are miners' cats. And miners liked them in those mine-type situations and those mine shacks because they kept the rodent populations down.
The Apache trout was the kids' overwhelming choice for state fish.
Truly one of our great heritage species, an animal that is a truly Arizona animal and found really only in Arizona. Not too long ago they were critically endangered fishes. The Game and Fish Department has been working very hard to reestablish Apache trout in a variety of different habitats, and they're actually doing very, very, very well.
If you count insects as critters, then don't leave out the two-tailed swallowtail. It became our state butterfly in 2001.
Well, that's our show for today. For more information, visit our website at azgfd.gov. For all the fine folks at Arizona Game and Fish, I'm Jim Paxson. We'll see you next time.